But I am really thrilled to be joined by three women who are responsible for managing some big brands' relationships with consumers, and are tasked with doing that at a time when those consumers' attention is spread across more places, outlets, platforms than ever before, which basically means you guys have really hard jobs. Think back to some of the really cool content examples we saw earlier today, right, from the early 90s, and think about media strategies and channel planning when those videos were produced, right? So 1991, Sun Chips is debuting, probably pretty clear where they were going to be running the creative that they showed us, and how they were going to connect with consumers whose attention was spread across 3 television networks, maybe a burgeoning cable TV landscape. People were reading newspapers fairly regularly. They were not interacting with social media. They were not going onto websites. And the sort of how you're going to reach them was pretty much right there. Made a few phone calls and campaign is live. That's not how it works anymore. So as we kind of talk about media strategies and the channel planning that you guys have to do to reach consumers, I'm really interested in exploring sort of how you develop an understanding of where those consumers are spending time and then use those channels effectively. So Jax from Samsung, Christina from Pizza Hut, Hilary from Marriott. Thank you so much for joining. And
it's Marriott like Chariot. In case
right.
We're not.
I'm paying attention. Let's dive right in. Those people need a little bit of time to process. I know, exactly.
It's still Pizza Hut.
Christina, since you just made a really good joke, we'll start with you. So when it comes to sort of consumer behavior and understanding changes in consumer behavior, those changes are constant these days. Understanding those changes is integral to maintaining relevance with prospective customers. How have your consumers' behaviors changed in recent years, and how has that influenced your approach to media strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think a simple answer could just be following the changes in the media landscape, right? And consumption habits, obviously less linear, more digital, those sorts of things. But the challenges that we have at Pizza Hut is that the base of our consumer is spread across multiple age ranges, right? So a decent portion of our customer is 50 plus. So those are our core consumers. We know how to reach them. They're receptive to our standard, media channels. The challenge that we're working through right now is, really leaning into that younger Gen Z, more cultural audience, trying to find things that align heavier with content, working very closely with our influencer team, just trying to find things that are more natural and organic, that creates that affinity with Pizza Hut. So it's definitely a challenge for us just based off of the two kind of different parallels we see from our consumer base.
Yeah, I can see how those sort of disparate demographics pull you in different directions. Jax, what sort of data or insights have been really impactful for you at Samsung in shaping your understanding of consumer preferences and habits? Like, how do you sort of, what are the data sources? How do you synthesize them in such a way that you can make sense of it?
That's a great question, because for us, it's a bit challenging. Most people, you don't buy your cell phone directly from the manufacturer. You sell from a retailer or a carrier. And so that's posed a very interesting challenge for us. The other challenge for us is at the end of the day, we don't have an awareness problem. So like in media, I don't need to say sponsored by Samsung. You're like, yeah, I get it. I know who you are. Even our amazing fold and flip phones, people know they exist now. Our challenge is truly that consideration. How do I get you to break that inertia, break that system that you're on to something better? And so to that point, we have to constantly be rethinking what data we use to say, is this working? So of course you do like different brand lift studies and all that kind of good stuff, but also now we're looking at things like social listening. Some folks in the room, I really appreciate when they saw our recent commercial, if you will, or ad back to a certain competitor of ours. We came back to them with a new ad last week, which was great, has some good social listening. Search volume, am I getting people to search our device more? Like there's just different things that we have to look through that it's not usual for media, but that way I can say, am I getting somebody to consider us more? I'll take the awareness, but that's really what I'm focused on.
Great. And Hilary, I know you've got an extensive background in data that you bring to your job every day. You also don't have an awareness problem at Marriott.
I think when people say it wrong.
But people do say it wrong, yeah. But we're starting to change that today. What sort of, I guess, unlike Jax, you have a lot of data about your consumer. You've got a pretty deep relationship with people who are, spending at night. What sort of data sources are you relying on when you're trying to understand consumer behavior and how people are making decisions as to where they're going to look a stay?
Yeah. I think, first of all, I could spend hours talking about that. And I think, so first of all, I oversee our global marketing operations, so I'm more on the owned channel side and less on the paid media, though I clearly partner with our paid media team very, very closely. People love to travel. It is a positive moment in their life. They plan for many, many, many months, and it's usually about either meeting friends or maybe they're on a honeymoon, even for business travel. And so people interact with our digital assets or our communications in a very different way. And so I think the value, every brand is going to say this, but the value of first-party data is obviously very important. And in the data regulatory environment and even cookie deprecation, I think the trust and that long-term relationship we have with our consumers and our guests becomes infinitely more important. And I think one thing I'm hyper-focused on now is this idea of putting choice at the heart of our consumer experience so that consumers can tell us exactly what data that they want to give us, how we use it to personalize their stay. So for us during COVID or post-COVID, revenge travel was obviously I don't know how many people took revenge travel trips. My husband and I went to the Maldives with our friends. It was epic.
This is revenge against
COVID.
Okay.
Yeah. But like when it comes to looking at the data and the trends that we're looking at, why people travel, the way people travel, the things that they want to experience, do they like full service hotels? Do they actually want to get out into the community and have more of an experiential cultural stay? All become really important. So very similar to Christina, the generational differences in how people travel and what they expect. Are they doing it because they want to go to a concert? Like the Eras Tour is a very popular destination right now. Or are they traveling for business and are road warriors like us?
Or both. Could be both, yeah. I don't think I've been in a conversation over 10 minutes long about marketing where the Eras Tour hasn't come up, which is fair. So we talked about changing consumer behavior. I think one of the things that sort of hastens those changes is the emergence of new technologies and platforms, right? Like if we were having this conversation 2 years ago, we probably wouldn't be talking about TikTok at all, but now it's something that's top of mind for you guys all the time, right? And there are plenty of other examples of platforms that have sort of swooped in, significantly sort of taken over people's time and become priorities for brands as they're trying to reach those consumers. If we are talking about broadly the future of marketing today, what are some of the sort of emerging technologies that you see now, TikTok included, that are sort of changing the way that you have to speak to consumers or where you speak to them? I'll go with Jim.
Oh, okay. Pressure. For me, I think one of the things I love is I can maybe put my crystal ball away. It's like that's what message should I give to what consumer, what time, what platform, and I think all of the platforms are really figuring out how to do optimizations where we can put all the creative in, put all the messaging in, and see what happens, and that's a really exciting thing, I think, as a marketer that we didn't have in the past. But also it's really fun to work with vendors and partners that are also reimagining their fields as well. So for us, we work very closely with Spotify. We talked about podcasts earlier, of course, what they're doing there, but we recently partnered with them to bring out, we talked about people going back outside again. We're working with Spotify to do unique concerts and to find the next best artists with Samsung and showcase how our devices can help you become an artist and celebrate that moment when you're first on stage. You know, it's not the Eras Tour yet, but you're on your way to it. And I think that's what's exciting too, is it's not just about optimization of digital media, but also working with those partners saying, yeah, like Spotify knows what they're doing when it comes to music, but now let's rethink bringing that live experience to it. And I want to bring Samsung with me to do it. So that to me is, you have to constantly be having the stories and figure out what's next, not just for you as a brand, but also for the vendors that you work with.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, I think, you know, it's really about the content that you're putting out there, right? And making sure that it's kind of breaking through what everyone else is seeing. I mean, we're in a world where no one wants to watch an ad, right? We're in a world where even when you're streaming channels, like you're a subscriber to HBO, or and then you're a subscriber to Hulu, and it's just like, how do you follow these consumers all the time when they're just moving around like crazy? So it really is making sure that the content you're putting out there is really resonating and fun and people want to engage with.
Yeah.
Not necessarily dependent on specific platform.
Gotcha. So it's sort of a platform, like we know the platform is important, right? And you have to sort of have messaging that fits on the platform and resonates there. But your point being just sort of overriding all of that is putting out something that is engaging and that, you know, similar to the example we saw from the AT&T business earlier today. It's like wherever that is, I'm going to watch it.
Right.
And I love, Jax, that you know, I ask about emerging technologies and we get to concepts, right? But Spotify's role in sort of bringing those events to people and then being able to scale them digitally is a new thing, which is exciting.
I also think as marketers, we get the opportunity to challenge ourselves on what like owned versus paid or where people are experiencing that changes. So a great example for us is WeChat in China or WhatsApp in the rest of the world. Like we've traditionally seen those as social platforms and how we would look at it. But a lot of our consumers are engaging with brands the same way they would on their brand app, right? So what we would, being able to book, being able to ask for concierge services if they're on property, and being able to say, like, I'm thinking about a vacation and I'm interested in this, but they want to interact in that platform that they've chosen to versus feeling like they always have to go out to the brand app that in order to do those things. So we're actually starting to look at what those experiences look like and how do we extend the direct experience with Marriott in those channels, because it's about being where our consumers are, not always expecting them to come to us.
And can you sort of take learnings from your relationship with a platform like WeChat and sort of bring it to, because we don't really have the super app here, right? But I know you work globally. Is that something that you can bring proactively to platforms in the US?
Well, I think to me that's where being a marketer is more fascinating and nerdy in the best sense of the word now than it ever has been. I think, you know, you look over the last 10 years and there has been pendulum swinging of taking all the tech and data and pushing it over to IT. And the marketers really getting out of it and saying, like, that's for someone else to figure out. And I think, at least in my world now, I'm seeing that pendulum swing come back to say, like, I have to understand the data. I need to understand the insights. I also need to understand how my content gets into the markets that I'm trying to get into. And so I think for us, the great thing about as we see that trend emerge and we start to see that ownership come back, it's actually allowed us to then take the learnings that we're seeing in WeChat or Line or Kakao, which are not platforms I knew the names of a year and a half ago, and what are the learnings we get about both our own owned channel experiences, but then how we should engage in those others.
Yeah, there's a lot there. But okay, so you know, one of the things that points to is the fact that consumer attention is spread across so many different platforms, right? You have to be present in all of those platforms. But you want to have some consistency sort of in how you're having a conversation with the consumer regardless of the platform. When you think about sort of planning or strategizing cross-channel or 360 or however you want to talk about integrated media, Christina, how do you sort of approach that, knowing that you might have one touch point with a consumer on streaming audio, and then you might reach them later in the day on OTT, and then on social? Like, how do you sort of plan for the fact that you're going to reach them multiple times in different places, and you want to be consistent but not necessarily repetitive? Like how do you tackle that challenge now?
Yeah, that's a really good question because Pizza Hut, we're known for our innovative flavor profile, right? So we're always coming out with new recipes, new pizzas, new products. But in order to balance that appropriately with value and really with products that you can get at a lower price point, we've really had to determine what that media mix is between all of our different channels, right? So, for example, if we have a new product coming out, that's really going to be a reach, KPI for us. So let's spend those dollars specifically on those premium placements, i.e. live sports, right? And then that really DR focus, we know that you're going to purchase our product. Let's push this new deal for you so that we can continue coming into Pizza Hut on a more regular basis. So it's more about what products really are resonating and performing better within each channel for us at Pizza Hut. And so one of our challenges is we don't have Samsung dollars. I wish we had.
You don't want them.
But so in order to do that, right, we have to be nimble in how we approach our media, especially for these different types of value products or limited time products. So we're trying to kind of navigate that space and be everywhere as well as we can be. So,
Jax, you have Samsung dollars, and as a result, I think the brand is able to.
After this meeting, I'm leaving.
As a result, the brand is able to show up in some really sort of high-profile places, right? That have there are fewer and fewer of them, but there are still moments where we sort of collectively coalesce around an event, and Samsung is often there. Those events are sort of by nature 360 degrees, right? Do you have any examples that you can share about just sort of ways you've capitalized on some of those big events or sort of integrated programs that you've done?
Yes, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we're constantly looking at is, to your point, just because it's considered a big event, is it the right place for us? So one of the areas I'm most proud of in the last few months is we did the Winter X Games right after our S24 announcement. And again, if you look at our phones, again, they flip, they fold, they do all these really fun things. But the X Games, those folks flip and fold and do all these really fun things. And so it made sense for our brand to be there. So to your point of the 360, of course, we sponsored something, sponsored by Samsung. We had our logo big on the ramp. I'm sure you call it something else. I'm sorry, I'm not cool. But on the ramp, and but I think to your point, then it was, how do we make sure we engage with the athletes and get the product to them very quickly so they're excited about it and they showcase it? We sent our influencers to the event. We sent PR to the event. And I'm gonna be honest, it's not easy. We still have to live by this Excel spreadsheet of who's doing what and is it truly still 360? But I think what was really exciting about that whole piece together was we can't just throw our logo on something to say it's sponsored by Samsung and have a TVC and a suite for the executives, or we can say, the X Games fit our brand. It's Gen Z, it's doing something different, it's pushing the boundaries, it's open innovation, and that's where it just felt so authentic that we went, yeah, that's a win. And then to find that the media KPIs aligned with it is great. So for me, we have small brands we work on. I've worked on smaller brands. It doesn't matter the size of the budget. To me, it's more about, does it authentically make sense to who you are? And a lot of times we chase the shiny things. I've been caught doing that. I've chased the shiny things. But you have to sit back and say, what's the objective? What am I trying to get at? This thing is super shiny. Go ahead. Pizza Hut, do it. That's awesome. I wish I could do it. Because you do some really cool things like, you guys work with Ninja Turtles. I'm going to get to do that.
She's wearing a customized.
Exactly. You know what I mean? So it's
They flip and fold too.
They flip and fold. That is true. Okay. Well, there's an idea. But I think that's it. It's what's your objective, and be authentic to who you are. And it doesn't matter what size of budget it is. That is what is going to help you succeed.
Yeah, that sounds like a sort of overarching sort of anthem for anybody who is delving into strategy or channel planning. It's just that you remind yourself who your brand is. And
Don't chase the shine.
Yeah, and speaking of the authentic piece, and I'll chat quickly about my Turtles jacket here, but we were partners with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem, the movie last year through Paramount. And it very casually came up at an upfront dinner with Paramount, and they were like, "Hey, we've got a new Seth Rogen film coming out, Turtles. We're in talks with Domino's." And I was like, "What? And so I was like, I do not have the authority or caliber to approve this, but I'm approving this now. But that was such an authentic relationship, right? We've had history. We've had that nostalgia feel. Like there's no way in time that you could have not partnered with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and be a part of Pizza Hut and delivering their favorite product to them. So so I agree with you on the authenticity for sure.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and nobody's questioning the authenticity of Pizza Hut when it comes to Mutant Ninja Turtles. They're, of a kind. Hilary, content personalization is something that I know is a hot button for you. I also know that it's like a critical tactic when it comes to reaching particularly younger generations who expect that from the brands that they have relationships with. Right? You have to know your customer, you have to show them you know them. So how do you manage that? Just tactically, how do you put the right message in front of the right consumer at the right time when it has to become hyper personalized and show awareness of what they want?
I was vendor side. Actually, one of my old clients is sitting right over there. It's Cassie. I was vendor side for 17 years, and I've been client side now for 18. And the putting the right piece of content in the right channel at the right time for the right person has been a catchphrase now for about a decade. And one of the things that floored me when I came over to the client side and I started being in front of all of these pitches from partners is that they were using the exact same personalization deck, just with their own logo on it. And I bring that up in the context of this question because what I've now seen is that everyone wants to talk about the big vision, but very few people have figured out literally how to do it and what it takes to do it. So they'll stop at that layer because that's when it gets really hard, right? Like that's when, as marketers, we have to do things like talk about a taxonomy, talk about how we're organizing our metadata, what is the content strategy, what are we trying to do, being outcome-led by our campaigns instead of just putting something out there and hoping that it works. And so I think one of the most surprising, I'm trying to figure out where to take that answer, to be honest with you, because I can take it so many places. But I think as we actually start to do all the really amazing hard work of understanding our content pieces and how they break down, because it's effectively all data. All of this is data. How do you put the data together in a way that comes across as a vibrant story for our consumers so that it resonates with them and they can interact with it and take it all the way through, hopefully to a booking of a fantastic vacation. As we've been able to do that, we've been able to break free of, we were talking over lunch, so transparently, one of the things I did when I came in was to say, what's the process to get content out the door? It's, for us, 110 days on average to go from intake to in-market. More than 350 steps. There's more than 7 operating models. It touches 43 pieces of technology. It's a lot. And there's no reason our marketers should be slowed down if what we need them to do is actually react in the moment with what our consumers are saying in order to put things in there. And so in order to do that, we have to break it all down and understand what it takes to read data, make decisions, have outcome, create content in a way that's scalable, which for like the creatives in the room has probably been one of the harder change management pieces, because you have to convince creatives that by looking at bits of content and breaking it down, it actually frees us up to be more creative when it feels like we have to be more rigid on the output. And then now what we're working on is using all of the really great technology, be that Gen AI or even phone photography has become far more important to us, of creating enough content to then put it in front of. So I think you see the wave coming, and now it's about content creation.
Does that resonate with you guys, just in terms of a challenge of personalization, being able to
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I would love to put your like last purchased pizza like right in front of you, right? So that you come and you're like, oh, that's my 6-top, stuffed crust pizza that I ordered last Thursday. Great, I'll do it again. But for us, it really limits us from a scale perspective. And when you get that narrow with some of our partners, we just don't see the performance uptick that we do a little bit more broad message from a creative standpoint. So it's kind of twofold, really kind of figuring that piece out. We are a lot more prescriptive from a creative standpoint within our CRM channels, right? Because we have access to that. We just rolled on a CDP, so we're really looking forward to deep dive into all of that first party data that we've had for so many years. I mean, it is our superpower at Pizza Hut. So, and it is across all of our Yum sister brands with Taco Bell and KFC as well. So it's time for us to figure that out, but it is definitely going to be an uphill challenge for sure.
Yeah, those 3 brands know a shocking amount about me personally, which is fine.
Can I be the question asker for a second? Because what I'm curious about then is if you think about the role, particularly with the deprecation of cookies, and now you have to have scale of audience size, and it's changing a lot of those. One of the things that I'm seeing is back to our roots in programmatic media and keeping it more broad upper funnel, which then changes. Now as we get into owned channels, now there's a bigger emphasis on having to do that personalization there because it doesn't make sense to necessarily do it up there because we can't measure the effectiveness or the reach and therefore the investment. And so we're starting to see the shifts, we have seen the shifts there. Are you guys seeing similar?
Yes.
Okay, I have a question that's, I work at publisher. This is kind of publisher specific, and I'll pose it to all of you, but it's a leading question, right? You all make choices as to where you put your brands, right? And I think the Winter X Games is a perfect example of here's this pretty simple synergy that just makes sense, right? Flipping and folding. It is a thing for Samsung and for snowboarders. But where you show up says, a ton about your brand, right? Or at least that's the thinking from the publisher side. It's people are going to want to run with us because this is an environment that says something about their brand. It's kind of an old-fashioned way of thinking, right? In an era of where influencers are a channel that is as large a channel as television or print. Is it true? Do you think about that when you're planning out a campaign, when you're putting together a strategy? Do you think about, hey, we want to show up in this place because there's a message there? And can you give me examples of places you feel like you need to be because it shows sort of a like-mindedness or resonates with your brand ethos? I'll go with Christina first because I was making eye contact.
Okay. So we're always looking for pizza eating occasions, right? So you'll always see us Super Bowl, you'll see us in March Madness, you'll see us in those places where it's group occasion, where we know people are going to gather together and eating pizza. But another thing that we're really looking at, we're a national brand obviously, but there are specific territories of the country that do not have a lot of Pizza Huts. For example, in New York City, right? We have maybe 2. But when you're buying nationally, a significant portion of that media is going to be dropped into that DMA. So we're looking at things, especially this year for the football season. The majority of our sales come from the Ohio Valley, Southeast and South. So how do we kind of tackle that? We know football from a linear perspective is the premium thing that everyone is still watching. How do we cherry pick some of those matchups, right? That we know that are going to be really strong in those specific areas of the country. We know that there's more than a handful of Pizza Huts that you can actually go to. So trying to kind of take that national strategy and kind of parse it down a little bit from a DMA perspective. So that's one way we've been looking at specific partners. TikTok, for example, is not great when you try to do things from a local perspective. So just kind of learning how these different partners can help us be more strategic.
How about you, Jax?
For us, the North Star that I tell my team I want to get to every day is we have the most innovative products in the world. And if we do lame marketing, that takes it all away. So I need to have the most innovative marketing to tell the most innovative story. So with our vendors, I want to be an alpha or a beta. Like, if you want to get my attention, come to me with being the first. Because if I'm the first to flip a phone, if I'm the first to do search, if I'm the first to have AI on my phone, then I need to be the first in marketing. And if I do things everybody else does, then it doesn't fit with my ethos. So, like good examples of that, we talked about Spotify before, like Snapchat doing AR lenses, filters, like they're they push us in our marketing constantly. They make our leadership very nervous. Like, what are you doing why are there flowers on people's heads with their phone? Like, just go for it. But I think, again, as I talked about before, like you said, you want to be a place where people are enjoying pizza. Well, for us, if I have an ad that says I'm the most innovative in the world and it's a lame ad, I'm not doing my job. And so to me, that's what we're going for. Sign me up for the alpha and the beta.
So it's sort of a showing, not telling.
Absolutely, yeah. I think in our briefs to vendors, I put at the bottom. We've hit a few recently, so I'm very proud. I want to be on, I want an ad age article. That is one of my KPIs. I want to do something with you, vendor, that other marketers are talking about, because that means that we've been innovating together.
Yeah, and as somebody who's read that message on a brief before, it's not.
What you
have to make clear is that it's not just, Jax wants to see her name in print. It's like, no, she's looking for work that is worthy.
Yes.
Yeah, and other people put that on their briefs too, and sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, just like what's the worst is when you see, like for me, when I see like my sister brands, Taco Bell or KFC doing something, and I'm like, call my rep, and I'm like, hello, like, so exactly, like I want to be that first to market, so you're making that splash, and it's something differentiating you from the pack.
And Hilary, you've got brands within the Marriott portfolio that have distinct identities, and you want them to maintain an identity. Does where you're putting your messaging sort of ladder up to the identity of those brands?
Yeah, as you guys were talking, I was like, this is fascinating because Marriott has 30 plus brands, we're up to 35 now. We have tons of products that then support it. And then you have all of we had like 8,800 properties across 127 markets, I think. So it gets infinitely interesting and complicated for that reason. So even if you look at luxury, how an Edition, which is a very modern luxury hotel that's fantastic if you haven't stayed in one, and you look at St. Regis, those are two very different brands, touch and feel in that. Or you go down to a Select, you've got a Moxie, which is a very hip, sexy, community type of place, or you can do a Residence Inn. I mean, like there are vastly different experiences in that. So when we lead with what we call the portfolio brand, Marriott Bonvoy, or we lead with a single brand, there's completely different experiences that we're trying to show. So as we pick opportunities of sponsoring things or being out there, it's very dependent upon, are we going brand-led or are we going portfolio kind of Marriott Bonvoy experience-led?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think we're just about out of time. Do we have time for any questions? Or
Yeah.
Great. Any questions? Right here.
Hi, this is for Jax. So when you say you want to be the alpha or beta, and Kelly before was very adamant about I need to see outcomes. Some of those alphas and betas are so new that the outcomes are what? Like, so do you just collaborate and decide together what those outcomes are going to be and how it's going to be measured?
That's why we work so well together.
Yeah.
I cause the chaos, and she makes it happen. No, I think we'll talk about it a little bit more in the next session, but I'm not afraid to fail. And I think too often we're afraid to fail. And so today with my boss, I was like, I screwed up. Like, what are you going to do? And so to that point, the risk to me is always worth it. And it helps that I work at a company that is the first to put up a foldable phone. So I'm like, well, if they did that, why can't I do this thing on Box? But to your point, you just have to be really clear with objectives. Whenever we fail, it's usually because we were not clear with our objectives. So to that point, I can't chase the shiny object as much as I want to. I have to at least be clear on my objective, and then if it didn't work, at least I tried. If any of you remember the first fold, it wasn't perfect the first time. It's awesome. So anyway, but yeah, Kelly and I balance each other. She makes sure those outcomes happen.
Are there any other questions? All right. Well, in that case, thank you all so much.